In the ancient Jewish world, it was customary that households have a room that was dedicated to worship and hosting guests and gatherings. Many households devoted the second story of their home to this space. The upper room is an important place in Christianity because it was where the Last Supper took place on what we call Maundy Thursday, the day before Jesus was crucified. It was here that Holy Communion was institutionalized. In Scripture, the owner of the upper room is never divulged. It was probably owned by a patron or maybe a family member. All we know is that the owner prepared the room and allowed it to serve as the foundation of the early church. As with most holy sites, the location of the original upper room isn't known for sure. The Crusaders identified an ancient church site above which King David was rumored to be buried. They built a hall which has been renovated countless times over the centuries. But more happened in the upper room than the Last Supper. On that night, Jesus washed the disciples' feet, providing a model of Christian service. He announced what was to come, that someone among them would betray him. But the story of the upper room doesn't end with Maundy Thursday. Jesus reappeared to the disciples after his resurrection in an upper room, and the Holy Spirit descended at Pentecost. Peter, Paul, healed and preached in an upper room. Was it one or many upper rooms? We don't know. So as I'm planning out my Resurrection Village display, I decided early on that I'd make my own upper room, and even created a scaled paper sketch. But then discovered Department 56's Last Supper building. This would indeed be a good alternative for you if you weren't sure about building your own upper room. So here it is. We have the staircase to the side and the door. And this carving here of the Last Supper. You may already have this set, and you may really love this building, which would fit in very nicely to a Resurrection Village. If that's the case, stop the video. You're totally done. You got it. But if you want more out of your upper room, if you sense that something is off with this building, then keep watching. I'm not going to do a standard review of the building as I would with other pieces, but I am going to go over what I like and don't like about this building. So the likes. I really like the details in the brick and the rock and the door and the windows. It's pretty spectacular. The coloring and the sanding looks really good. And there are all kinds of little accessories that just make it really speak well to the times. The dislikes. There's a window here, but I'm not sure if it's supposed to be the Star of David. I mean, it's not a Star of David, but then what is it? What is up with this frieze, this carving up here? It's just off. It's not fitting exactly with the bottom or the top. It's just out of size. It's not completely framed out. I mean, we have the sides and the bottom, but where's the top of the frame? I mean, I get why they added it. It's the Lord's Supper. That's how you know that this is the building that took place in. But I think this could have been done a little bit better. And when I put my Jesus figure here, it's out of scale, which isn't the building's fault, but it would be something to consider. So, with all those things in mind, I went back to my original idea for the upper room and my original sketch, which now has a present coffee stain on it. And the main difference, why I prefer my upper room to this one, is that mine will tell not only the story of the Lord's Supper, but the story of his reappearance in Pentecost that happened in upper rooms, plural or singular. Let me show you what I'm going to make. During the days of Lent, before Maundy Thursday, I'll have the main entrance facing outwards with a door and 2 windows above, just for a little ambiance. Now, on Maundy Thursday, I'll turn the building so that this large window here will face the viewer, and you'll be able to look inside of this window and see an image of the Lord's Supper to signify that that is happening in this building at this time. This staircase going up, I'm strategically giving it 12 steps, 1 for each disciple. I'll wrap the landing around to the back and have a door on this side. This I'll display after Easter. On the inside, I'll have a picture of Jesus showing Thomas his wounds, another great moment of faith in the resurrection story. And then on Pentecost, which is 50 days after Easter, I'll turn the building around once more and have another large window with a print of the disciples with the little flames above their heads, Pentecost. So my building will show the events of the upper room in order that they happened. I'll be making my upper room out of assembled foam board and covering it with plaster. If you're hesitant about making your own upper room, don't be. Yes, there are a lot of steps. Yes, you'll be mixing up batches and batches of plaster. Yes, you'll be making stairs and roofs, which is advanced plastering stuff. And did I make mistakes along the way? Of course, but I'll walk you through it. Although I'll be speeding up the video and giving general overviews on plastering, because I don't want to take 13 hours of your time, don't worry, I'll cover specific components in our ongoing plaster series. So if you catch me skimping, improvising, or just going way too fast, you can check out the video links for a more in-depth tutorial about those specific components. Starting at the beginning, you'll create a rough sketch of your building on paper and then get some exact measurements to use on your foam board. It's best to have a pencil, cutting board, single blade knife, like an X-Acto or a utility knife, a metal ruler, and a metal square to help make straight cuts across and up and down. I'm measuring out 4 building sides on this foam board. Once your sides are all cut out, you'll start cutting out your windows and your doors. And this is where your square will come in handy. I first will mark where the second story starts and go from there. Your square will help you get straight lines. Also note that you'll want your windows and doors to be drawn and cut slightly larger, about a quarter to a half inch larger than you would envision your final window door to be. You will have to allow for the plaster to roll over your foam board. It's a really common mistake not to modify the shape to accommodate the thickness of the plaster. Definitely a lesson I learned many years ago. Don't want you to make it too. And again, you don't have to strive for perfection when you're cutting out your windows and doors. Just try to get it as straight as possible. For the stairs, again, separate video for that because stairs are tricky. I also need to have 14 steps instead of the 12 to reach my second floor, so I'm going to add these to the other side, and that's fine. Keep in mind that your cut marks will all be covered with your molding plaster afterwards. Once you're done cutting out all of your sides, you'll assemble the building with painter's tape on the corners. If your top and your bottom is out of alignment, totally fine. You'll just use plaster to cover up later on. I'm going to plaster over the foam board and leave the foam board inside for stability, which I recommend doing. I'm going to wrap my foam board with a plaster shell before I add my molding plaster on top. What I'm doing here is taking sheets of dampened Bounty paper towels and dipping them into 1 part plaster of Paris to 1 part water. I'm laying the sheets on top of the sides, trying to remove air bubbles and wrinkles as I go. To keep the sheets attached to the foam board, I'm wrapping the ends over the top of the foam board and along the sides. Wrap the foam board with these sheets completely before adding on the second layers. You'll notice that it'll stick a little bit better the second time around. Let this dry for 8 hours. The shell will still be damp to the touch, but pretty hard. I'm going to take an old steak knife, any knife will work, and I'm going to cut out the windows and the doors. It's kind of hard to spot them from the exterior of the building, so I'm going to just run my finger on the inside, find the cut of the foam board, and then I'm going to move my hand and then attempt to cut it out as straight as possible. If you're a little bit off, it's fine. You can tear your shell as well. When cutting plaster shells, it's easier to start in the middle and work your way out, and trying very hard not to let the plaster buckle. It can do that and it'll get all wrinkly and cracked, so just a note to always go from the center and work out. Now that I've cut out all of my windows and doors, going to be making bricks out of this molding plaster. So what we're going to do is lay down blobs of plaster, and while it's drying, we're going to carve out the bricks as fast as we can, and then we're going to make another batch, put it on, make the bricks, and continue on. I lost count on how many batches of plaster I made, but it was quite a lot. You only have about 15 to 20 minutes before your plaster dries, and once it's dried, it's not going to make a brick. So you really do need to make small sections. I got a little overzealous at times and had to speed through, and you can kind of tell that in the bricks, but for the most part, you have a lot of leeway in making brick mistakes here because this is an ancient building and it's weathered and we're not striving for perfect straight lines. Your main mission will be to make your horizontal lines as straight as possible. Your vertical lines, you have a lot more room to kind of get them a little bit off. You're going for speed. You're going for making small sections of plaster. You're going for straight horizontal lines. Once the plaster is set, I do like to go back to it within the first hour of drying and kind of weather it a little bit more. So I'll run my knife across it, I'll poke my knife in and pull out some plaster, I'll ding it up a little bit more. You will not really be able to tell much of these effects while the plaster is drying, but you'll see it later when you're painting. We'll be making bricks in a separate video. This is a technique that we'll kind of work on as we go along with this plaster series. I'm not too concerned with the tops and the bottoms or the windows and doors. That I can add plaster to later on once I'm done with my bricks. Here I kind of ran out of plaster, but I had a really cool shape going on, so I just went with it, and we will just have missing bricks on this side of the building. So here I'm just throwing a blob of plaster onto my plastic wrapped glass cutting board, and I'm going to gently set my building on top. That'll give it a nice floor. And then as a last final touch, I'm just running my knife and my fingers over some of these windows and doors just to kind of get them a little bit flatter. Here I'm just testing out paint colors to see how the paint will look on a piece of scrap plaster that I had. And I've got some good choices going on here. All right, I've got a cup of water, I've got a damp foam brush, and I've got my paint choices. So here we go. I'm going to use one color and I'm just dotting different rando spots with it. And I'm constantly turning the building over and painting along. Once the paint is dry, I'm going to go back over it with a light color and just brush the tops to give it a more weathered effect. And I'm also just going to paint on the inside just for fun. And here is the roof. I'm going to paint that separate. All right, now I'm working on the door and the windows. I've just got some popsicle sticks. I'm using wood glue and I'm just giving these doors a frame. I'm trimming up the popsicle sticks with an X-Acto knife or a pair of snippers, just whatever I had on hand. Literally just eyeballing these. I'm going to trim these up once I get them dried. So I'm just having some fun here, coming up with different door designs. Here I've watered down some brown paint and I'm glazing the doors, just giving the doors a little bit more color. And here I'm adding columns, wooden columns to the Pentecost window. I could have done this with plaster, but I just really wanted to do the wood. I also noticed that my plaster dipped a little bit here by this door, so I'm adding a wooden threshold to cover up that dip and also give it a little bit more length into the room for the picture that will come. I'm adding a wooden frame to the front door, and I did have to cut away the dried plaster to make it fit. And I'm also using wood glue here, and I'll cover up the remnants of the glue with some paint. Here I've got some wild grapevines that the cat really, really loved. I'm just trimming these up. These will be for a window shade on the front portion of the house. I use these grapevines quite often actually. They're just really easy to work with because they're hollow. They're easy to cut and bend, and they just look really, really old. You can't really tell from this angle, but they are slightly slanted outward at the bottom. On the door, the frame was a little bit too bright. It didn't pop out as much as I wanted, so I'm going to run some darker brown over it. And if you have a good eye, you'll notice that my plaster hung over the bottom of the door frame at the top. Yeah, I'm just going to leave that. You'll never notice in the final stage. I've got my pictures that will go into the window. These are printed out on regular paper. What I'm doing here is I'm scoring diagonals at the corner about a 1/4 inch in. And what I'm going to do is score some lines going down the sides so that it looks like it's a shadow box. I'm gluing this frame together with some scrapbook glue. I'm totally improvising as I go along, and you may need to do that as well. It kind of depends on what pictures you've selected and how far in you want your picture to be inset in your building. Unfortunately, my camera battery was dead when I thought I was filming the Lord's Supper, so let me tell you here how I got it in. What I did was I set the picture in and marked it with a pencil on where the glue lines would go, and I just made a stream of glue around where the picture would go, a wide stream of glue so that I can have a little bit of adjustment room if I needed to move the picture up or down or to the side. And then I laid that side down completely and let the glue dry so that there were no runs. I do like to use wood glue for crafts like this because it doesn't run as much as other glues, and it really does hold paper in place very well. All right, now this door gave me some issues. It was a good plan, but but getting the picture to fit. So I had to score the picture a little bit more to get it to bend so it looked a little bit more natural, like you were looking into the door. Very tricky. I recommend that you either have your door totally open, maybe to the outside, or have your picture through a window. It was just really, really hard to get this. Totally didn't film Pentecost either. Sorry about that. I'm going to now add the roof in. Just hot glued this down. I did want to leave one part open in case I ever had to get into the building and replace something or add something. So I did want one corner to be completely open. This is totally up to you on how you want to set your roof into your building. I'm going to pause the video so that you can see that in the middle of the roof, I cut out a circle, or the closest thing I could get to a circle, and I've got a tea light that is going to go into the roof upside down, and that will light my building from the inside. Here I've made a dome of plaster and I've scarred it up with a knife. To get that shape, I used a measuring cup. I don't know why, I just really wanted this roof to be blue, so I have a midnight blue that I've kind of watered down, and it was really blue, so I'm just going to go over it with some beige to kind of tone that blue down. Here is some fabric. This is actually from a dollhouse carpet set, and I trimmed it up, and I'm going to use this as a little canopy to kind of shade that window a little bit more so that you can see in, but you can't see all the way in. And I also chose this because it's got a little bit of blue in the color, which will reflect the blue of the dome roof. All right, and here is our final product. So we've got the front, and I'm going to turn it, and here is our Last Supper scene. And the stairs leading up. And then I'm going to turn it, and here is our presentation scene. So you can see Jesus pretty clearly, and Thomas is right on the left side, but yeah, he's hard to see. I can always go back and fix this later. Turn it one more time, and here we have our Pentecost scene. And then here we go back to the front, and then I'm going to shut the lights off and show you what it looks like with the tea light glowing. I did not glue the dome down so that I can replace the tea light if needed.